of soldier's joy. But what I want to talk today about is the backing part, and creating maybe a more interesting backing part to a fiddle tune. Now this might not be the most modern bluegrass thing you've ever heard, but if you're goofing off and want to have fun and somebody else plays the melody pretty straight, this might be a fun way to play backup. So we're used to just straight roots and fifths. But really, all these low notes are bass notes. And there's nothing that says that we have to start on the root and just oscillate between the root and the fifth. Okay? So let's just say this: root, third, fifth, octave, okay? If I put a strum in between every one of those. What if I went the other way? And then it becomes about things adding up to four. It becomes more interesting. Now people say, wait a second, now isn't that note too high to be a bass note? Well, that's middle C on a piano. So really starting at middle C and everything that way, it's that could be a bass note. So I think it's okay for that note to be a bass note. Okay? So now that I'm able to use more notes from each chord. And get more creative at the order of them. So now, let's take that one step further. If I can walk into a bass note, well, I could walk into one of the other chord notes. So maybe the G chord notes, which are these. Or maybe the D note with the fifth of the G chord. So now I've got lines like this. So it just starts to get a little more interesting than always just going root and fifth all the time. Okay? When we start looking at the substitutions, the first substitution is a sixth chord. Now it doesn't mean we're going to play a sixth chord. It just means we're going to let that be one of the notes in the bass. The sixth note of the scale. So now instead of just the root, third, and the fifth, we add the sixth. 1, 3, 5, 6. So it becomes more interesting. Then it is possible another substitution might be a seventh chord. Maybe not right away on that C, certainly on the G7. And maybe on the C7 that leads into the F in the second part here. Whoops. So it starts to get more interesting. Okay, so I'm going to play a whole version of this. Let me play a whole melody for fun, then I'll play a backing part, and I'll just maybe be a little bit adventurous on how I do it, using some of the things we just talked about. Okay, so I'll play the song, I'll play a backing part, and I'll finish with the song. Here we go, Soldier's Joy.